Okay, so today is it's our steering group meeting. So we have our steering group members here, and we also have most of our farmers here, and we have a few extra guests as well. So please, if you haven't done it now, maybe at the next break, just make sure you sign in and get your name tag, please. And I suppose the idea of today is that we're all here in the one room to talk about, what is FarmPEAT project all about and what are we trying to achieve. We have the farmers on the ground who are doing the work, and we want the communication going both ways. So the farmers to be communicating with everyone in the room, letting us know what they think about the project and what they think could happen in the future, because we've just been informed that we have a year's extension of this project, which is great news for us, but also there's more things planned coming down the track. So hopefully we're going to get some information from the department and from other people of other things that are coming on down the track. So I suppose that's the kind of whole idea of today. Our steering group haven't met since March because we were planning an end of project conference, so we didn't have another meeting since March, but now we're going full steam ahead again for another year, thank goodness. So this is kind of a mix of a steering group meeting as well. So I will be presenting some updates of the project since we last met in March. But for everyone else in the room, I'll just give a little bit of background of the project. The farmers obviously all know it, but just for any guests that mightn't be as aware of what we're all about. And I think it'll help inform our discussions anyway as we go forward. So my name, just in case if anyone doesn't know, I'm Caroline Lawler. I'm working as project manager on this project. We have Bernie here up at the top. He's our local liaison officer in Umris, and Katie is in the room somewhere. Sorry, I can't see her at the moment, but Katie is our public liaison officer. Just to go over the agenda for today, so from 10:20 until about 11 o'clock, we'll have our introduction and our project update, and then we're going to go into a panel discussion. So we have 5 panelists lined up, and they're going to sit up at the top of the room. We'll have questions and answers from everyone in the room, so that should be quite a good discussion about agricultural peat soils with policy, emissions, hydrology and farming covered on the panel. So we'll have another break then for tea and coffee. And then after that, we're going to have a workshop here in the room, so we'll rearrange the chairs in a workshop style and have groups of about 8 to discuss specific questions, which we'll put up on the board, up on the PowerPoint here. I think you've all got them anyway via email at this stage. So we'll have the lunch then here, and we'll head out for the field trip. I think the forecast is for heavy rain after lunch, so I'm sure you all brought your wellies and your wet gear, but we can, if we feel that the discussion is going very strong here, we can always extend it a little bit and have a shorter field trip if we feel that's the best thing. So we should be finished up here by 4 o'clock either way. So I'm going to present the first few slides, then Katie's coming up, and then Bernie, just to give you a full rounded picture of what's going on. So just to give everyone an idea, the project aims, our aims are to work with farmers in the Midlands of Ireland who are farming on peat soils to try and design a results-based agri-environmental scheme, which is basically focusing on the peat soils and how we can manage our peat soils better for climate, biodiversity and water quality. And we also consider other characteristics on the farm, such as woodlands, hedgerows, tree lines. And the main thing is that we're rewarding farmers. It's not it's all carrot and no stick. We're not penalising anyone for doing anything different, but we can reward farmers for doing and achieving results on the ground that we're looking for. And then the other key aspect of the project is increasing awareness about what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it. And that we're doing that through largely engagement with schools, primary schools, secondary schools and third level, and also community groups in the Midlands. So just to clarify where we are, we're in the Midlands. We have 8 project sites across South Roscommon, where we are today, Offaly, Kildare and Westmeath. So the 8 project sites are there. You can look this up on our website. We have an interactive map there and you can go into all of the sites. But we are here in Clonbowley Bog or Ballydangan. The arrow is there, look. So that's us here in South Roscommon, which is one of our 8 project sites. And I suppose the thing we're really trying to increase awareness of is that we're working on drained raised bogs. So all of our 8 project sites are focused on a raised bog. And this is an image which I would have had in my head, before I started this project, of this is what a drained raised bog looks like, or it's harvested, it's clearly all the surface has been removed, there's very little plant and animal life on it, and it's bare peat. But what we want to increase awareness of, and what we're learning as well, is that this is also an example of a drained raised bog or a damaged raised bog. So the edges of our raised bogs have been reclaimed over hundreds of years for agriculture, forestry, turbary obviously as well, and other land uses, but to a large extent it's been for agriculture. So this image is of an intensively managed grassland on deep peat, and they have been termed hotspots for greenhouse gas emissions. So a hectare of intensive agriculture on agricultural grassland, I should say, on deep peat emits something in the region of 25 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent per hectare per year. And that would be the equivalent of about 4 or 5 family cars being run per year. So the same kind of emissions that you would be getting from 4 or 5 cars. So that's why we're doing what we're doing, I suppose, just to put it in context, that we're actually trying to reduce these emissions that are coming from the agricultural grasslands. So just to give you an update, I suppose, on our flavour of what we get up to, as well as working with our farmers. We go to meetings and conferences and we give presentations. So one of our farmers here, Jonathan Cahill, was our representative farmer on our steering group for a year. And he gave a presentation at an ecological conference in April in Athlone, and it was received very, very well. I think a lot of the delegates came up to Jonathan afterwards and congratulated him on just kind of being brave and being the only farmer in the room and giving his perspective. But I think that's very important, that the farmers' voices are being heard at all these meetings as well. We were also at the Tagisk Grasslands on Peat Soils workshop in Gerteen, which was an excellent gathering. I know a lot of you were there at it as well. So some other presentations as well, and then just always we're trying to link with the other projects that are working on peat soil. So like the Repeat project, they've been down to one of our sites and engaged with us on a community day, and we've facilitated them in getting access onto farms to do peat probing and to further their own research as well. We have a NASCO tower on one of our farms, and hopefully we'll have a second one installed before the end of the year, with Waters of Life and Prep Soil as well. So just to give you a flavour of the other work we're doing. I suppose one of the big jobs that Bernie had when he got going with us was to go out doing soil sampling on a lot of the farms. So I know a lot of the farmers here would know Bernie from walking all the fields and taking peat soil samples. So what we want to do with that is, I suppose, compare what we're finding on the ground with what the estimates are out there. So we have this estimate of 335,000 hectares of grassland on drained peat. Now, we'll be talking a little bit about that later as well, but that's the figure that we have at the moment, and it's the one that we had at the start of the project. So we wanted to see, like, how do they get that figure, and how does our work on the ground compare to that? So I suppose the map that you can see here, the yellow, it's green on my screen, but it looks more yellow there maybe. That's defined as pasture, or agricultural grassland. And the grey is just basically not pasture, not agricultural grassland. So this would be what was used to calculate the 335,000 hectares, in addition to some peat soil mapping. So based on this mapping here, which is it's called Corrine mapping, the total area of participating land defined as pasture or agricultural grassland by Corrine is just over 1,100 hectares. Okay, that would be in our project area that I'm talking about. And then if you overlay this with your peat soil layer, you get the total area of peat soils on pasture as 528 hectares. So that's again within our project area. So this is based on the data that's already there, okay? So that represents, that represents 46% of pasture or agricultural grassland. So what we did then was, when we were doing the soil survey analysis, we noticed that some of the plots that were mapped as peat were not peat, and some of the areas that were mapped as not peat were coming out as peat. So the yellow areas here, you can see, are they yellow on the screen there? The yellow areas here are what are defined as peat soils using the Tagisk maps. The grey areas are non-peat soils, and the coloured points are the points that we identified as peat soils in the field. And then the grey points are the points where we identified there's no peat in the field. So what we found was, when we were comparing with the mapping that's there was a lot of areas where it was very well lined up. So the maps that were there originally were actually very accurate, it seemed to be quite accurate, but there were places where it was inaccurate. So We just, instead of us saying, look, it's largely accurate and it's fine for use in the field, we just wanted to put a figure on it, and just to say, okay, is it 10% out, is it 5% out, or is it 1% out, which would be very, very minimal. So we've just done the first kind of stage of analysis to look at where these points are, the points that are not matching up with the data that's already there. And you can see there's some areas which are coming up as not peat, and that's already been mapped as peat, and vice versa. So we're going to do a bit of further work on this and get a figure on it. But basically, there's a 5% difference. Have I got that here? No, I skipped. There's a 5% difference on just the definition or the identification of agricultural grassland at the moment. So like the Korean mapping is identified that it's 46% of our project area is agricultural grassland on peat, whereas we've identified that, we've reviewed it, and it's coming up as 51%. So there is a 5% difference just alone on the pasture, but now we're going to do the same kind of review on the peat soils and see what the percentage difference is there. And it might be very minimal, but if it's 5 or 10%, it might be significant enough. So that's work that's in progress. Then just the greenhouse gas survey and the wet grassland scorecard. This is another study that we're doing on the subsample of our farms, where we have Mark O'Connor going out, and he's taking measurements of the greenhouse gases that are actually coming off the agricultural grasslands on peat soils. And what we wanted to do was to compare the greenhouse gases, the emissions that are coming off the grasslands that have scored very well in our scorecard system, and those that have scored very low. So we're hoping that the highest emissions are coming from the grasslands that have scored the lowest, and then we're hoping that the lowest emissions are coming off the grasslands that have scored the highest. So that will just give us a bit of confidence in our scorecard. So Mark has told me that on his preliminary assessment of the data is actually supporting that. So it's good news so far, and we'll get final conclusions from him further on. So Katie, I think you're up next.
Yeah, so a big part of the project is also the community engagement side of things. So I've only recently joined the project earlier this summer, taking over from Paddy Malone, who's done fantastic work over the last couple of years on the community engagement side of things and with the Love Your Wellies competition. And of course, it's a big part of the project because farmers don't exist in a silo, they exist as part of a community. And, oh, thanks. This way? Okay, cool. And a big part of our community engagement program is the Love Your Wellies program. And as part of this, we run an annual art competition for school children to tell the story of the peat landscape through art, be that comics, poetry, paintings, 3D models, whatever their heart desires, really. And as part of this year, the team delivered workshops across our project areas to give the children an understanding of what they're telling a story about. Because even though they might live near a bog or, have been out on the bog before with their family, they might not necessarily know the plants and animals that exist there. And so that's what these workshops kind of tried to show, was in the field trip workshops where they went out to the different bogs in their areas, it was using the peat probes, learning about the carbon in the peat, testing out the sphagnum moss and how much water it holds, learning about the different animals that they see there. And as part of that, over here you see they're carrying sheets of paper, so that's kind of like a scavenger hunt. So there's a list of things that they kind of have to try and find, and that allows them to connect with it on a deeper level, because they're not necessarily just looking at the landscape and seeing it as a habitat, but they're actually seeing the plants and animals that live there and actively trying to find them with their own eyes. And then they also created these beautiful kind of pieces of, it's an activity called Colours of the Bog. And so they have to try find different plants that represent the different colours of the bog. And so again, it's trying to combat this idea of, like green blindness, where people see a green landscape and don't see the different plants within that landscape. So this is doing the exact same thing, just with the bog. So rather than seeing a sea of brown, they're actually, looking a bit closer and seeing the different colours that are within that sea. And we also delivered, well, not me, because I only joined the project later, but the team delivered in-person workshops in schools as well, for those schools that maybe didn't have the capacity to join us on the bog. And as part of that, the students had to think about a kind of story of agriculture and peat extraction and climate change, and how do we, move forward? What are the actions that we need to take in these different sectors to find a solution that is just as well? And then they also did kind of art workshops, so they create, even though they couldn't see these plants and animals in person, they imagined what they would look like and painted them and drew them within their classrooms. So we're trying to bring the bog into the classroom where the students can't get out. And we'll be doing that again in this year's competition that will be launched in the new year. And these workshops set the stage then for the students' art pieces. And the art pieces ranged, as I mentioned, from comics, which these 4 boys here did a beautiful comic called Bog Busters about creatures from the bog, all the way to embroidery, which was our winning piece here by Olivia Pekskowska. And this story tells the boardwalk of Clara Bog. And on the other side of the t-shirt on the front, there's the viviparous lizard. And Olivia really tried to bring together the landscape, i.e. the boardwalk, with the creatures that live in it. And then we also had paintings, 3D models. We even had a stop motion animation where one of the entries created different animals, including swans, and then it is stop motion animation of those creatures moving through kind of another 3D landscape. So it was really a wide range of creative projects. And in July, we hosted an award ceremony for all of the finalists at Lunnymore Heritage Park as part of their anniversary, which we were really, really grateful to them for hosting. And they also kindly donated a trip to the park for the winning class, so Olivia's class group. And this is a photo here on the left of all of our finalists standing alongside Tina Claffey, who was our presenter of the awards on the day. And Tina's art was on display on the day as well. And so we were really trying to get the finalists to think about, how could they bring this creativity beyond school? Like maybe are some of them thinking about following it, through into college, just as beyond just kind of doing it in Love Your Wellies and actually, following through on what they've done as part of the competition and bringing it into everything they do. And Tina's art was just an example of what you can accomplish, if you really focus and follow through on your passions. And then we've done a little YouTube video here, so it's on the FarmPEAT YouTube channel, and you can hear directly from some of the finalists. So we did interviews with the finalists where they told the story of, what inspired them, how did they find working together, and there was beautiful stories there of the students here with the comics, the 4 boys on the right-hand side, saying one of the things that they really liked was working with their friends and collaborating together and, working as a team. And so it goes to show that there's a lot of things that they gain from Love Your Wellies. Beyond just learning about the bog, it's actually, coming together as a team and learning to work alongside one another and maybe solve creative differences as well. And as well as working with school children, we also work kind of with the community at large. So as Caroline mentioned, we've engaged with different projects and brought people from the department in to learn about what FarmPEAT does. We've also attended the ploughing championships where Catherine and Chagas kindly hosted us at the biodiversity stand, and we had some great conversations there about peat soils and similarly the animals that live in those peat soils and the birds, because there was the different birds and habitats on display in that area if any of you saw it. And we also joined the Irish Peatland Society trip recently, which was a great opportunity to learn about different projects going on around the Midlands. And personally, I really enjoyed seeing the Corley Boardwalk for the first time and learning about the Celtic Roots Art Studio, where they use wood from the bog to create beautiful pieces of art. And so again, it's just a way to connect together the cultural heritage and the natural heritage together. So going on these sorts of trips enables us, with the FarmPEAT project, to think outside the box with our future events as well. So for example, applying some of what we learned from these visits to the next round of the Love Your Wellies competition. And we also attended the Kildare Biodiversity Conference, where we had the stands on display and an opportunity to maybe meet people from more urban or suburban areas who might not necessarily live near a bog, but an opportunity for them to learn about the work that farmers are doing in Kildare near Umaris Bog, near Monasterevin. So we're kind of trying to go to a different range of things, both within kind of the peatland agricultural sector and also connecting with groups outside of it. And we are also, Bernie and I attended the Buzzwells Day with Irish Rural Link just this week, which allowed us to connect with different politicians and TDs and senators operating in the Midlands to, again, create that connection to their policies and what they're working on locally, so as to bring out what we're doing into the wider community. And these are just some photos from some of these events. We also hosted our Umerus Community Day a couple of weeks ago, which was again a great opportunity to learn from the Umerus Community Development Group, which is putting together the proposal for the Umerus Peatlands Park, and to learn about peatland restoration, what can be done, and kind of the vision for it as well. And sometimes with these projects these days, going out onto a cutaway bog and hearing the project organizer Eddie Smith discuss, what this could look like and what the future of this bog can be and what it can bring to the community really brings a lot of inspiration to us as well, because that's really what we're trying to do, is imagine what our peatlands and what our agricultural grasslands can look like into the future. So that was a great opportunity to also hear from the Repeat project, where they're developing updated maps, so using historical maps of Ireland's peat soils and kind of mapping them according to where peat soils are today, to track the changes over time and to track the accuracy of those historical maps as well. So it was really interesting to hear from different communities, and we'll be organising more of these community days as well. Now that we have our extension, we'll be organising days closer to Athlone and Roscommon and our other bogs as well. So that's something to look forward to. And in terms of our kind of wider public outreach, we're trying to be quite active on social media, posting 1 to 2 times a week. And I just put up these graphs because you can see the big jump. And I wanted to use this as an opportunity to show the effectiveness of the Love Your Wellies competition for promoting FarmPEAT and getting us to a wider audience, because all of those jumps are during the Love Your Wellies voting period, when we put it to a public vote and family and friends of our finalists can like and share in order to vote for their favourite entry. And so this boosts FarmPEAT in the kind of public sphere quite a bit across Twitter and Facebook. And it's another reason why the Love Your Wellies public voting stage is important. So it's not just internally within those schools and communities, but through linking it with our social media, we're also bringing more people in so that, then they can follow us and keep up to date with our regular updates as well outside of the voting period. And engagement varies quite a bit. Generally on Twitter and Facebook, our likes and shares would range from 0 to 20, During the Love Your Wellies period, it would be a lot higher. But we, try to maintain that consistency and share updates from days like this. So keep an eye out, make sure to like and share. But also from kind of day-to-day stuff, like going out scoring on the project farms and the kind of background updates, like the Eddie Covariance towers being installed on our project sites. So kind of events and the back-end stuff as well. And we're also really, happy to see FarmPEAT in the media, particularly this year with the nature restoration law debate. FarmPEAT's work on raising the water table on agricultural grasslands was very topical. And so we had, farmers like Seamus Fallon who've done the blocking the drains actions, which we will see later today. We had these farmers being interviewed by newspapers to tell their story, to tell their perspective on this highly controversial topic at the time. And it's also a really important avenue to get the other actions that FarmPEAT does into the media in terms of the results-based schemes, and kind of getting people used to this terminology as well, so that they see that the work is being done, and that maybe down the line when it's rolled out on a wider scale, that then they won't be so taken aback, that they'll have read it in Agriland, the Irish Times, the Irish Examiner, and will be a little bit more aware of it. And Kildare Nationalist also, shared the Love Your Wellies award ceremony that we did. So we were really delighted to see that, as part of the wider publicity around the Lullymore anniversary celebrations. FarmPEAT's award ceremony was mentioned kind of in local newspapers after that. So yeah, it's great to see. And in the next year, we'll be kind of doing a lot more of this. I hope to see more of FarmPEAT's work in the local media as well. And we'll be organising more community days, as I mentioned, but also we'll be organising more educational visits, both with those school children as part of the Love Your Wellies competition and also with third level. So this year we hosted GMIT for an educational visit where the students practiced scoring and got out onto a farm and saw how results-based schemes work. And that's not necessarily something that would be part of their curriculum. and modules. So it's really important for them to see FarmPEAT's work in action. And we'll be doing more of that. So in November, we'll be doing a talk with the University of Galway, and we'll have a few more kind of Zoom calls and field visits then in the new year scheduled with universities from across Leinster and also, as I mentioned, the University of Galway. So we're really looking forward to those because they're the next, those agricultural science students, those environmental science students are the next advisors, they're the next project managers, and so it's important for them to understand how these schemes work and how the scoring process looks like on the ground, so that when they do come into employment, they'll know how this works and how to engage with the community and farmers. So we're really privileged to be in the position to run these events as part of our community engagement work. So I think that's so these are some of the publications we did this year as well. So you can see these. We did this in the lead up to the ploughing championships. We did just a small information board to showing the different types of dams that are installed in our drains. So we showed a plastic dam and a peat dam and showed the message. We have the clear messages that we're always trying to get out to people, again, to alleviate those fears in light of a lot of the information kind of put out during the nature restoration law debate. So we're trying to highlight that it's raising the water table, it's not flooding the surface, it's not necessarily rehabilitating peatland vegetation. So these are the messages that we try to get out in this information board. And we also did a giveaway to the tickets to Lunnymore Heritage Park. So again, trying to support other projects and other businesses doing work in this area. And we've also done an information leaflet, which we have today, which you're welcome to take away with you, and more YouTube videos as well. So an information video on how does a raised bog forms with illustrations created by Paddy Malone, and a dam installation training video from the training day that our farmers will have been familiar with, that attended last year. And so we did a YouTube video kind of chronicling that process to show the different steps of installing peat dams and plastic dams, so that when they're seeing this in our newsletter, which the issue 4 that we published earlier in September, they can click into that video and sort of remember what the process looked like, and also for other projects coming down the line, or maybe people who aren't parts of projects like these and don't have the opportunity to come out on training days, they can look at these videos and see what it looks like, if they're not able to go out and see the work in person. So our YouTube channel is a really important part of our work, and we'll have plans to publish more podcast interviews with researchers and other projects working in the Midlands to promote their work, and again to share the story so that people can engage with it even if they're not able to attend things in person. So that's kind of our main work in terms of the community engagement side of things. And now I'll pass over to my colleague Bernie, and he'll discuss the farmer engagement side of things.
Hello everybody, my name is Bernie Duffy and I'm a farmer from South Kildare, bordering the Offaly border. So my local bog is Umras, and some of our farmers are here today. So the question is, how did a farmer manage to end up in a project like this? Well, I'm part of a community group, and we're looking to negotiate a lease with Bord na Móna on part of the bog that they've stopped harvesting on for community purposes, as a utility. And we decided then that it would be a good idea maybe that if we could enhance the rest of the area around the bog by asking FarmPEAT to come and select Umras as one of their project sites, which they did. And then for some reason they managed to get me on board as a farmer. Now I'll tell you, I wasn't too familiar with the word re-wetting or nature restoration really before it became part of the project, but I soon did, and I was wondering, should I be hiding under a table or not as a farmer? But basically with Caroline mentored me, and I've always believed that we need to do things better as farmers around these sensitive soils. So in terms of the FarmPEAT project and how we reward and encourage farmers to be part of the project and to engage in it, we use a payment system, and the payment system is based on scorecards. And we have 5 scorecards. Predominantly, the one we use most is a wet grassland scorecard. Okay, so we score the grasslands closest on peat, closest to the bog, for their value their biodiversity value. See, payments are linked to nature quality on your farm. So therefore, the higher nature quality, the higher your payment level. Each plot or field is scored out of 10 using a scorecard that captures high and low quality, which reflects past and current management. Now, we have 5 scorecards. Like I said, the wet grassland scorecard is the one we use most. We also have one just for peat. We have one for woodland. We have one for dry grasslands, and we also have one for boundaries. Okay, it's the quality of your hedgerows. So, in return for farmer participation, your score equates to, a good score equates to a good payment. And then the poorer your score, obviously your payment drops as well. So here we're looking at, we have a maximum payment of 9,100, which I don't think anyone would turn down. Like, it's a good payment. It's a good reward for managing your lands to the standards of the project. And then you have a minimum payment of 133, which means there's great scope to actually bring up your engagement in the project and to financially benefit from it. Now, what we're not saying here is that there is actually minimum payment of €800. So everybody who takes part in the project, irrespective of what their score is, they will be paid €800. So to date, as you see there, so payments directly for scoring is basically just 180,000. Now, the overall amount paid to farmers is just over $250,000. But a lot of those payments will be based on the supporting actions which farmers undertake to improve their score and to bring up their long-term payments. So as you can see here, we have actions agreed with 177 by 28 farmers, completed to date 77 of those actions by 14 of the farmers. And so you can see there's a completion rate of 50%. Now, these supporting actions focus on different areas of the farm. So one is basically watercourse protection. So where farmers would be accessing streams for drinking water, we now can have water troughs supplied. But generally speaking, the level of support is around 50% of the cost of wherever actions are taken. So then we improve habitat quality. Habitat quality, probably gorse removal on peatlands or FarmPEAT, and probably in those areas where there are hedgerows, FarmPEAT doesn't promote growing hedgerows or planting trees on peat soils, but where they are, we agreed to actually improve the quality of them by planting hedgerows that maybe have fallen into disrepair. So water table management obviously is the one where we do dam installation to bring up the water level. And of course that will improve your score, because when we're out scoring, we also score your drains. It's not just the positive indicator plants that are actually on the plot. And all of these actually, and the idea of course bringing up the water table also means that in time to come, the quality of the plants in the plot will also improve. So your score will improve over the years. It won't happen necessarily in the duration of the project, but anyone that undertakes these measures can look forward to a higher score. And I think with schemes to come down the line, those scores will pay in the future as well. And livestock management is pretty much self-explanatory. It's basically, we provide fencing to keep cattle away from the streams and the drains. So we had a peat restoration training day, and that was it was earlier this year, Caroline, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay. And so the two types of dams that we install are plastic dams and peat dams. Plastic dams, they're expensive. They take a good bit of knowledge on how to put them in properly. And, we set with the peat dams or the plastic dams, we can set the water table fairly high to start with, because once you start bringing it down, you can't bring it back up again. But with the peat dams, and you'll see them here, we put a pipe in, and there is a bend on the pipe, so the farmer is actually in control of the water level. He can turn the bend on the pipe to either let the water down, or he can turn it to bring it back up again. So here you can see beforehand, and here you can see afterwards in terms of the water table. of course, when if you manage to have a water level that's 70 centimetres below the surface, and then if you bring it up another 20 centimetres, then the calculation is that it will save 6 tonnes of CO2 per hectare per year. And if it's done over the entire acreage of grass peatlands, which, as Caroline mentioned earlier, is 335 tonnes, 1,000 hectares is the estimate as it stands at the moment. But that estimate might change. But if we work on that figure, then that leads to a saving of 2 million tonnes of CO2 going into the atmosphere every year. And that actually equates to 3% of our national emissions, which is considerable. And still, bringing up that 20 centimetres really doesn't affect the ability to farm on those lands. So we had a feedback session in Tullamore going back, again, earlier this year, where farmers came and they gave us their opinion on what works for them in the project. And one of the things that works is flexibility. As Caroline said earlier, basically, nobody's tied into having to do anything. You have options, and you undertake the options which suit you best and which you're most comfortable with. And farmers like that. What they also like is the fact that the FarmPEAT team or representatives will visit you on your farm, give you the best advice they can, and help you to undertake those actions and prepare them for you. So we've also had training days, and training days very often are in farmer sheds. I'm sure some of the lads here probably remember sitting in the sheds just down the road here during the winter time. And apart from actually listening to the presentation, farmers talk to each other about the challenges of farming on peat soils, and probably never more so than this year with the wet weather we've had. It's hard enough to farm on mineral soils, never mind peat soils. So all the actions are voluntary. They're sufficiently incentivised in that if we go back to raising the water table in the drains, FarmPEAT will pay for 100% of dam installation. And I suppose really what farmers were looking for as well in terms of projects is long-term commitment, so that when you undertake some of these actions, don't undertake them lightly. And 5 years might seem like a long time in farming. It's not. Really what you're looking for is a longer term commitment in terms of those payments. Maybe, I suppose that's something we pass on to the department, that farmers are willing to make the commitment, but they also want a commitment coming the other way as well. So I think next is Caroline. Thank God I got on my list, first time ever to present.
Just to, I suppose, give you an idea of what we're planning to do over the next couple of months, and then because we have our new year's extension for next year, so I suppose, like anyone in the room, you can have a look at this list. I'll go through it a little bit, but feel free if you have any ideas or suggestions, definitely let us know either today or after today, just if you think, God, that's something you should really look into now that you have this extra year, we'd really appreciate that as well. So for the next couple of months, I suppose we're just focusing on finalising the details so we have a few farmers that are waiting to actually complete their water table management actions. So we need to just move on ahead with that and get them either set up for the new year, excuse me, or perhaps completed before the end of this year. And then kind of another big job is finalising the payments. So we've finished the scoring of the farms, and we need to go through the scoring results and the payments and submit the claim from the department and all that. As Katie mentioned, we're going to be launching our Love Your Wellies competition again for next year. So again, informing the schools of that and getting ready for the new year for this. I mentioned the soil survey analysis that we're doing, so we want to complete that and have a report at least drafted by the end of the year, and then get everything set up in terms of databases for 2024. So we'll be busy, and I should actually, probably top of the list there is recruit a project officer. So I suppose we were a little bit unsure of what we could do in terms of staffing for the last few months, and Bernie stepped up and took on extra hours, thankfully, and himself and myself have been trying to fill Emma's shoes, which has been tricky. So I'm delighted to say we are hiring. If you can let the word out there now, we'll be advertising soon. But if anybody knows a good person with an agri-environmental background, please send them our way. And then, so for next year, I suppose, as I said, it's supporting the 13% at the moment. And I know there's one or two farmers that we must visit as well and look and see if there are any wash table management actions that they can complete on their farms as well. So supporting them to get them completed. Increasing our community awareness. Katie has gone through that, more community days, more outreach, more just getting this message out there that raising the wash table even by 20 centimetres is going to have a huge impact, beneficial to climate, and it might not have a drastic impact on farming practices. More training days. Farmers, you'll be delighted to know we'll have another training day for you next year, at least one. Scoring the farms again, so we'll have a fourth round of results-based payments for the farmers in FarmPEAT, which is great. Just increasing and strengthening our links with the other peat projects that are out there, again, that's important. Continuing our greenhouse gas emission studies and water level monitoring at our research farm. So I mentioned that already. Mark O'Connor has completed a year of the greenhouse gas monitoring, but he did say there are some gaps in the data. So it's actually great that we have that extra time now to just fill in those gaps and have a complete set of data at the end to present. We want to increase our reach with the schools and third level students, and then obviously delivering strong reporting at the end for the department and having an end of project conference. But like I said, if anyone has anything else, and we will be sitting down as a team to kind of go through the details of this for next year and what our plans are, but if anyone else wants to bring anything to the table, please, we would really appreciate it. So that's the end of this session from our perspective, but we're here for questions, and if there's any questions from the audience here now, and then we'll be moving on to our panel discussion.